So we will be starting our instruction course. The topic is career as an ophthalmic researcher. No more a professional suicide in India. And I'm very thankful to the AIOC and the scientific committee for giving us this opportunity. So without further ado, I will start with the first talk from me. And it is on the role of ophthalmic researchers in the current scenario. I hope it's visible.
Yes.
So I will be speaking on role of ophthalmic researcher in the current scenario. So some few words of truth and reality. I have an academic conflict of interest because I'm a professor and my views will reflect my academic standing. I do have a financial conflict of interest too, as I'm a practicing government surgeon and my views will affect whether or not I get referrals. I have a personal conflict of interest as I work passionately in my profession, so I may be biased. Most importantly, I know that I am talking to an extraordinary league of scientists and I need to share something that will improve their opinion of me. So I'm forced to make comments that I know they will wish to hear. So we have just seen a few months back that the Lancet and the any JM retracts. They are the Makkah, Medina, and the Gita of the research publications, but they retracted because the research was not original, that was not authentic. So what is happening? What is the purpose of research? To uncover truths. And number one is the reality, and the other important part is the validity. So truths, they are not equally generalizable, and all research is not equally justifiable. So importance of a research that requires a sample size of 1 lakh to reach a significant p-value will be far less than that of a research needing a sample size of 10 only. That is the difference. What is the importance of research? It's in the relevance of finding the great issues. First is the function, that is the capacity to act and implement. And the other thing is the feeling, that is towards the quality of life, how it can improve the quality of life. So the researchers, academic centers, guides, and funding agencies must consider truthfully whether a proposed study is intended to uncover a relevant truth, function, or feeling unbiased. So what must not be practiced? Dedicating time and energy for a pointless or impractical outcome, publication of an unconnected paper, support of a renowned researcher, and a prestigious department are just unjustifiable. The present system that is guided by financial gain, power, and prestige, most funds channelized to improve cataract surgery only and avoiding other important areas like glaucoma and community ocular health, avoiding those important parts. So there is an understatement. According to the vision for Horizon 2020, it states that vision researchers should never forget that beyond careers, publications, and funding, there are patients out there who need and expect a better quality of life. So please, researchers, once in a while, close your eyes and imagine what impact an eye-opening research has on people affected by blinding diseases and keep working for the good cause. So the role of ophthalmic researcher is far, far beyond imagination to be practiced in the near future. So these are the reasonable questions for the ophthalmic researchers. First is what is the purpose of research? Who decides what research should be done? Who decides that purpose? The investigator, the academic department, the university, industry, the state, the sick, or the well, because they don't want to be sick again. So there is a science behind every research. The science is to validate, and the penultimate aim of science is to provide results for the real world. Truth is need to be in harmony with the reality. So ophthalmic researchers' goal is to uncover and if possible to understand that external reality. Patient care, in contrast, only deals with relevance, whether the treatment or finding will be of any help in clinical care. Does validity address an important issue? Is unfortunately least concerned with most of the clinicians. Conflict of interest. It is a very important issue, and it's governed by the corrupting power of industry which provided funding in controlling data manufacturing needs, and influencing practice patterns. A financial gain from industry is always a conflict of interest. Industry is not the only one source of biased, self-benefiting research. Academic institutes funding for what they want, how to control data, manufacture need, and influence practice patterns. And the data from the ocular hypertension treatment study was not allowed to be seen by anybody except the investigators only. So what is happening? And when Yale University published Clausen's book, The Cartoons That Shook the World, they removed the cartoon. So where that title stands against the wishes of the author. So this is what happening by the institute funding. So the importance of conflict of interest. These are an integral part. So no ocular researcher will survive if they don't honor COI mandatory for personal survival, nor would industry or universities or governments also. And conflict of interest are omnipresent and yet not detrimental. So it's important to handle COI well. So now there are few researchers who are saying no COI and yet falsifying data. So, but they are more likely to be believed. On the contrary, researchers who are disclosing many conflicts are often misunderstood by the audience that the presenter is biased, whereas COI policies are counterproductive in terms of science. Also, COI statements need to be validated. There is no method for these COI statement validation. So the research priority should be in accordance to a vision for Horizon 2020. There are 19 priorities in ophthalmic research like neuroglia interaction, gene therapy in retinal diseases, micro-incision cataract surgery, femto laser assisted surgeries, diabetic retinopathy, RMD, etc. But issues like improving care and care delivery in the third world countries and ocular healthcare within everyone's reach sounds an anomaly. And very few people are working on this. So does influence matters? I will quote one example. A great Philadelphia physician, Benjamin Rush, around 250 years ago, did a lot of for mankind. For example, he was one of the first individual to advocate for the abolition of slavery. And he was also involved in the founding the first new nation's first hospital. But he believed hypothetically in bleeding patients of yellow fever and believed that it helps in improvement. So in that course, he destroyed career of a young researcher who did a study which proved that patients with yellow fever who were bled were at no advantage than those who were not. And then there is this old school criticism towards new idea like prevalence of glaucoma in normal IOP range and ocular blood flow role. When the importance of ocular blood flow arises. So these European ophthalmologists at higher positions were totally dismissive of this data. And they didn't allow the researcher that funding, the young researcher. So the importance of studies and publication with no positive result. So there can be 4 results only. Obvious chance of patient benefit, 13% of the publications. Studies with reasonable chance of patient benefit, someday 30%. There might be more. There might be some chance of patient benefit, 42%, and no benefit to the patient, only 15%. So importance of every type of publication is important. We need to know those drugs who won't be beneficial in any particular ocular disease. So research for what? For promotion, name and fame only, or for the sake of mankind, or for the sake of science. So most of the researchers had no interest in being attached to the humans the science was supposed to be serving. So research, it is a complex issue between academia, industry, and research facility, and it is certainly not governed by the patient, unfortunately. So we have a lot of success in terms of genotyping, VEGF inhibitors, OCT and phacoemulsification with implantation of PCIOL. But how to influence behavior? Then there was 25, 50, 100 or 1000 years ago through word of mouth that this is the better choice of treatment or management in a particular disease. The answer is a disturbingly clear no. So for the ophthalmologist's career, it is becoming more a business rather than a profession. And the ophthalmic residents, they have knowledge of ethics, but they are lacking in ethical practice and behavior. And that behavior can only be learned by internalizing experiences shared with ethical mentors. And the the evidence when it comes to the evidence in the research. So the clinical trials, the multicentric clinical trials, they have a very important part to play. But to get results at a fast rate, so many researchers are working on surrogates and not on the patient who are going to be benefited. So this is the irony of clinical trials. The Hippocratic Oath is still used in many medical schools as something which the graduating students swear to honor, requires physicians to swear that they will not share their knowledge with anyone other than brethren. And research beyond cataract and flax, it is just fair to be spending a major portion of research money on the development of instrument that will make things better for those who already are good and ignore those who are in dire need. So we need to have academic freedom and basic ammo. Research is certainly forgotten. So first we need to understand what reality actually is and how to benefit living creature. In summary, the methodologies of science can be applied not just to those subjects that are relatively easy to study, but to the truly great issue of mankind, how behavior can be understood so that it can be influenced in a way that individuals will be more caring and less violent, and more specifically for physicians, how ophthalmic researchers can be better guided to make sure that their actions are beneficial, fair, and enhance the ability of each person to care for himself or herself better. So without honest research and robust validation in our medical field, science simply going to die. And in this era of evidence-based medicine, we have simple retrospective study to complex randomized multicentric clinical trials. And earlier obstacles like priority of healthcare, lack of funding, and infrastructural support from the institutes and non-conducive environment. That led to exodus of high-quality ophthalmic scientists from India, but tides are streaming in positive direction now. Up to 65% of US FDA trials are being outsourced to other countries. So in pre, post, and present COVID era, India is a great choice. More and more accredited and dedicated ophthalmic research labs are coming up with advanced communique and technique levels. And PubMed publication from Indian authors are on a manifold rise. The agency like IEC, ICMR, DBT, DST, and the foreign funding agency like the NIH, WHO are promoting ocular research in terms of funding and appointment. So definitely there is a silver lining for full-time ophthalmic researcher in vastly growing Indian scientific scenario. Thank you. Thank you so very much. So any comment, Bhavna ma'am?
Yeah, that was a wonderful presentation, actually, Dr. Arvind, and you have raised very pertinent issues, the ethics of publications and the ethics of course, the research projects or whatever research we initiate, the major part should be of ethical consideration. And that is, which is largely forgotten, and that is exactly what this instruction course would be covering. Everything from the ethical issue to the construction of the research trial to how to get it published. So I think you initiated the instruction course very nicely, and let us go forward and let us take the audience through this process of research and publication.
Any comment from you, Rajendra sir?
You have very nicely, Dr. Arvind, nice presentation, and you have nicely stressed on the ethical issues of research, and which is, I think, one of the most important parameters of a good research, because it has to be an ethical research, and the more and more people should get into it.
Yeah, it's an untouched topic. So I'm very thankful to AIFC and Scientific Committee. Balla sir is also here. So our next talk is on hurdles in doing research in ophthalmology by Professor Dr. Ashok Kumar Bairwa. He is a very dynamic and prolific phacosurgeon. He is a senior professor at the Department of Ophthalmology, R&T Medical College, Udaipur. Sir, over to you. Please start sharing your screen. Yes, sir. Please start.
Unmute.
Please unmute yourself.
AV guys, can you unmute Dr. Bhairava? Please unmute him.
I can't unmute him, sir.
Sir, we can't hear you.
Voice is not there.
Sir, we can't hear you. AV guy, can you do something? Please help us.
In the meantime that he fixes his problem, I think we can go on to the next speaker and he can catch up.
Yeah, that will be great. Dr. Bhalla, are you ready?
I think as he has already shared his screen, we'll just wait for a few minutes. If just the issue of
I think it's not
muting.
running, probably.
Have you
Bhairava sir, we can't hear
unmuted,
you.
sir?
He's not able to run, I think.
I'm calling him.
Dr. Bhairava, you have to unmute and increase the volume on your computer. Your slides are working well, I think. Huh? Your slides are working well. You have to just unmute yourself.
सर अनम्यूट करिए सर, आपको अपने आप को अनम्यूट करिए और उसका वॉल्यूम
अनम्यूट है।
में वॉल्यूम इंक्रीज करिए।
सर आपका वॉल्यूम बढ़ाइए, लैपटॉप का वॉल्यूम फुल कर दीजिए।
जस्ट अ मिनट।
वॉल्यूम फिल उसका फुल कर दीजिए सर।
So I think Dr. Maurya, you can go ahead with the next presentation in the meantime.
Okay.
Let him ask him to get ready with that volume and all.
Okay, sir. Please, Isha, please start this presentation. So we will be starting with the next presentation, that is what, when and how about clinical trials. And it will be by my mentor, Dr. Rajendra Prasad sir, a prolific phacosurgeon and very innovative by innovating this Terminator chopper and this sieving needle microcapsulotomy technique. And he has innovated a lot of things to make cataract surgery very easy for everyone. Over to him.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind, for giving me this opportunity to speak on a subject which I probably never spoke on this kind of subject, because I've been into more of the clinical work and the innovation. So, but I'll just try to do the fair work on this subject. So my topic is what, when, and how about the clinical trials. Friends, you know that just Dr. Arvind spoke about the career in research. I think the clinical research is an excellent career, but I think it's challenging also. But if you look at the history now, it's been now almost 30 years. We have not been able to bring even a single new antibiotic for the last 30 years. So look at the kind of research which is going on. We do a lot of research, but not the important one. We are not able to bring out a new antibiotic. So I think it's very good career for the youngsters. Like, they should get into it and help to improve the life of the people at large at a global level. So what is clinical research or clinical trial? Clinical trials are the research studies that objectively discover, verify, and compare the results of two or more therapeutic measures. So therapeutic measures could be a drug, it could be a device, it could be a surgical procedure, and it could be a new diagnostic tool also. The most important part is, in any clinical research, we tend to understand the disease process in a much better way, because we do a lot of studies on these diseases and try new drugs, new devices. So we come to understand more in a much better way to the diseases, and which actually brings in a new ways to improve the treatment and improve the quality of the life of the people with the diseases at a larger scale. As I said, like by doing clinical research, we can improve the life of the people at a larger scale. So that is very important part of any clinical research, and this is the most important plus point of any clinical research. This is unlike clinical practice. In clinical practice, like you are looking the disease factor of an individual. You're treating an individual and looking the benefit of that individual per se. But in clinical trial, because clinical trials are designed to move the science forward, because you're moving the science forward and helping to enhance the health of the larger population, as I said in the beginning itself. So this makes a lot of difference in clinical research and clinical practice. Clinical trials are basically a planned experiment which involves the human volunteers. So that is the most important, the volunteers or the human persons, so those who have come for the clinical trials. And the second important thing is you are using the investigational products. The investigational product means where you do not have the overall history of that product in terms of its safety, in terms of its efficacy, and in terms of what kind of result it's going to give us finally, we do not know. So these are the products which is used in any clinical experiment or clinical trial, and that involves the healthcare team, which has to be a very expert healthcare team to conduct the clinical trials. So as I said, the clinical practice has a set pattern of prescription, and you have a certain amount of the expected successful result. You're treating a patient, you're giving a medicine, you're treating him, you're putting him on under observation, and you expect some amount of the successful result. There is almost 70-80% of the successful result. But on the other hand, clinical trials, it's absolutely an investigational pattern. You do not know what kind of success you are going to get. You may get success, you may not get success. Many times you may harm the volunteers, and this makes a lot of difference from the clinical practice. So that is why the ethical issues in clinical trials come into play. Because you're dealing with the human population at large, you're using investigational products, and you do not know the efficacy, safety, and risk of that product, which you are going to use on a human volunteers. So the ethical issues becomes very important in this situation, because unless you have the ethical approval or ethical issues, the clinical trials would become injurious to the volunteers. So in that situation, you have to obtain a human research ethical approval. You need to, this should be done during the design of the research approach. Like it should be done before you start collecting the data, or before you start putting the patients on the trial. You have to take the human research ethical approval from the institution, whichever institution is workable in that particular situation. And the first international code of ethics was laid in Nuremberg Ethical Code in 1947. But not why this code was laid, because as I said, the ethical issues are very, very important in any kind of clinical trial or research trial, because we all know about the Nazi experiments in 1940s during the World War II. So a lot of Jews were put on to the very injurious and very injurious trial, and atrocities were conducted on these Nazis, Jews by the Nazis. And secondly, in 1932, the radiation experiments were being conducted. And you also know in 1940, the Tuskegee syphilis study, because these were the study which were conducted on the human trials, human volunteers, and without putting them on any kind of treatment, they were just being tried on the particular disease or particular experiment was being carried out without getting any approval from the ethical institution, without getting any approval from the volunteers itself. So that is why this Nuremberg Ethical Code was laid down in 1947, which has a very clear-cut definition, like the voluntary. There has to be a voluntary consent is very important from the people, those who are volunteering. The subject should have the ability to freely withdraw it. Like if the subject is not happy, he can very freely withdraw from the trial. The banned injurious experiments were banned in that should be banned. Like you should not do the injurious experiments. The mandatory animal experiments first before you try on the humans. It has to have a scientific validity. There should be a fair subject selection, favorable risk and benefit ratio, like the benefit should go to the subjects, not to the trial. There should be an independent review and respect for all the participants. So these were the important points which were put in the Nuremberg Ethical Code in 1947. And then later on came up the second International Code of Ethics that was called as a Declaration of Helsinki in 1964. The 1964 Helsinki Declaration included all the 10 points of the Nuremberg Ethical Code, and it was added with 3 more codes. Like the first one was a distinction should be made between the therapeutic research and the non-therapeutic research, and institutional mechanism should be there to ensure that the main ethical principles were followed, and provision of the proxy consent by family members when subject could not consent themselves. So these are the 3 important points which were added in the Helsinki Ethical Code in 1964. And then finally came up the CIOMS in association with the WHO, that is International Ethical Code in 1982. The International Ethical Code stressed on social and scientific value of the research. There has to be a scientific validity of research. There should be a fair subject selection for any research. There should be a favorable risk-benefit ratio to the subject. There should be an independent review, informed consent, and respect for all the participants. So these were the important points which were stressed in International Ethical Code. And we all know that this International Ethical Code came up with the Universal Ethical Code later on, and with the GCP guidelines in 1986. GCP means good clinical practice. Like if you're doing a research, it has to be with a good clinical practice. You have to look at the benefit and the benefit of the participants. So not the industry. You should look the benefit of the participants. Keeping that in mind, the ethics has a 6 core values. It has to be a trustworthiness. There should be a trustworthiness. There should be a respect to the participant. The conductors, the researchers should have the responsibility of all the things which is going on in the research. There should be a fairness in the research. There should be a caring to the participant and citizenship of the participants. So the cornerstone of the ethical research is the informed consent. Informed consent is a process by which a subject voluntarily confirms his or her willingness to participate in a particular trial after having been informed of all the aspects of the trial that are relevant to the subject's decision to participate. So you must make him understand the purpose, the procedure, the benefits, and the risk of that trial, which you are going to conduct on these volunteers or the participants. So you need to make them understand the potential benefits and potential risk of that trial. And after making this, the clinical trial would have the volunteers would have the eligibility criteria, like depending on their specific medical condition, gender, and specific conditions. So you need to, the clinical trial includes the treatment group and the control group. And treatment group is given the standard treatment and the new drug, while the control group is given just the standard treatment, not the control, the medicine. And clinical trial should have the randomization. So that is very important. Like you need to have a computer randomly assigns the patients or the participants to a group, treatment group or the control group. And many times you give the placebo to the control group. The placebo, you all know, is a drug, the material which is given looks like a drug, but it doesn't have a drug inside. And the blinded clinical trial, you all know, if the parties or the researchers or the patients, one of the parties not knowing what kind of drug is given to the control group or the treatment group. And that could be a single blinded or double blinded. If participant is not knowing, then it's a single blind. If researcher and participant both not knowing, then it's a double blind group clinical trial. And if both researchers and the patient, they are not knowing about it, then it's an open label kind of trial. So the strongest study design is a double blinded, randomized, controlled clinical trial. This will give you a much better result. And I think if I don't have the time, then I will go to the, do I have 1 or 1.5 minutes?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay. So as I said, the double-blinded, randomized, controlled clinical trial is the best trial. So we all should focus on this kind of trial. And trial can be a prospective or retrospective. Like prospective means the patients are enrolled for the study before any treatment is given, and the progress of the patient is monitored during the course of the treatment. Retrospective means your past case records and other statistical data are used for analysis. Investigators to rely on the methods employed and data available. So overall, the clinical trials, what a clinical research or clinical trial is, you have a hypothesis, then you generate a protocol for the research, then you have an objective of the protocol, you get into the efficacy outcome, you should know the efficacy outcome, you should know the safety outcome, then you need to take an ethics committee approval, then the consent from the participating patients or the volunteers, and then we reach some conclusion and then generalize the results. So that if the result is positive, then you take the result to the concerned authority, and then it is generalized for the use to all over the patients, which would benefit from a treatment point of view or the disease point of view to that particular community or particular kind of disease. And you get to know the effect of the disease, then industry will take it up, advertise, and industry will take. So all these factors will come after this, and the research clinical trial could be completed in this way. So thank you very much. I'll stop here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. That was an excellent presentation covering all the aspects about clinical trials. Any short comment, Dr. Vaishali? Doctors?
Yes, sir. It was really excellent and a brief overview of what the research constitutes. So it was really wonderful, sir. Thank you so much, and very valuable in this IC. Thank you, sir.
And I would like to add a few points that regarding while performing these clinical trials. So we need to have first the ethical clearance, then we need to get it registered in the Clinical Trial Registry of India or any other registry all over the world. And now, previously they were retrospectively included, but now we can start all the clinical trials prospectively only. So, Berwa sir, are you ready?
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Please start sharing.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Please start sharing your screen.
Screen not yet visible.
Share screen.
Yes, sir.
So there is a green central point from where you can start sharing your screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's fine.
No, it's not there.
No, it's there now. Yeah.
Close it, sir. It's open your desktop. Keep it open. First, open your presentation. Then start sharing the screen.
Now screen yet not visible, sir.
You have to open the presentation, Dr. Berwa.
It's opened, already opened.
No. Now what you have to do is इसको minimize करो जो अभी सामने दिख रहा है आपको. Minimize this. जो भी स्क्रीन है इसको मिनिमाइज कर दो टॉप से टॉप लेफ्ट.
Yes, done, sir. Oh.
इसको मिनिमाइज करके फिर अपना प्रेजेंटेशन खोलो, फिर इसको मैक्सिमाइज करो, एकदम से आ जाएगा आपका प्रेजेंटेशन. इसको मिनिमाइज कर दो पहले, आपका प्रेजेंटेशन इसके पीछे छुपा हुआ है. इस स्क्रीन को मिनिमाइज करो, ऊपर टॉप लेफ्ट में ना ग्रीन रेड येलो पे लगा दो. अब एक बार टिक, छोटा हो जाएगा. नहीं हो रहा है?
हो गया सर.
नहीं, आपका प्रेजेंटेशन नहीं आ रहा अभी भी.
आपका प्रेजेंटेशन ओपन है सर? आई होप
प्रेजेंटेशन ओपन करो पूरा फुल.
Yes, it is open, sir.
नाउ स्टार्ट शेयरिंग स्क्रीन.
शेयर करो, शेयर स्क्रीन. No.
Shall we start with the next speaker?
Yeah, I think time बहुत ज़्यादा हो गया.
I think you
So-
can start, Dr. Arvind, and we can include Dr. Bairwa later on.
Yeah. So our next speaker is Dr. Sahil Bhandari. He will speak on plan your research. What starts well, that only ends well.
ना डॉक्टर बैरवा का आ गया स्क्रीन.
Yes,
Dr. Bairwa, sir, screen में दिया, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please start, sir. Please go ahead.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Make it full screen and go ahead.
Good.
Yes, sir. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Arvind Moria and Dr. Rajendra Prasad, sir, for giving me opportunity in this instruction course and to speak on hurdles in research in ophthalmology. As we all know that research in the medical field is an ongoing process, which is essential for the scientific progress. It has more significance now as we are in the era of evidence-based medicine. High quality research is the basis for this. Studies have shown that research training coupled with training program helps to promote trainees' clinical thinking, analysis, improve the quality of patient care, and facilitate for training academic output. The path of research is not without hurdles. Research needs proper infrastructure and sufficient funds apart from the dedicated group of workers. A research process requires dedication, a lot of time and honesty. In our country, the institutions of healthcare gets priority over the research for obvious reasons. Research is not looked upon as a favorable career option by the majority. The basic qualities of good researchers are enthusiasm, integrity, and experience. In developing countries like ours, we face many challenges in the development of research. Firstly, people do not pursue research as a full-time job, whereas the fact is that it cannot be taken as a part-time job. Secondly, the institutions and departmental heads do not give high priority to research activities. High volume clinical work is given more weightage for the financial reasons. Thirdly, the clinician scientists find that environment in India is not conducive for doing high quality research. There are many Indian scientists who are engaged in high quality research abroad when they are well recognized initially when they return to India, but most of them do not pursue research as they consider it a professional suicide and not as a lucrative and remunerative as that of clinical practice. Lastly, research ethics are not followed to the core. Due consideration is not given to all the ethical aspects of the research and publication. A study was done in UK to find out the barriers perceived for conducting research. The common barriers were lack of the time, intensive clinical work, lack of mentorship, lack of research training and skills. When all these limitations get compounded due to inadequate infrastructure for even basic postgraduate training in many medical colleges in India, these colleges are obviously not conducive for conducting research. Thesis writing is a mandatory requirement for completion of postgraduate training, but the majority performs research without proper planning and supervision. This is partly due to the poor understanding of the entire process of research work. In India, investigators have to overcome many challenges while conducting research. The most important ones are inadequate infrastructure and well-trained staff with high attrition rate. In most of the institutions in India, doctor-patient ratio is inadequate. Hence, they are overburdened performing routine clinical work, taking care of patients itself. The opportunity to develop skills required for conducting trials is limited. Clinicians find it difficult to get trained in basic clinical research, good clinical practice guidelines, regulatory requirements, and ethical issues due to lack of the time and proper guidance. India is so vast that it is but natural to find a lot of variability in the standard of care, attitude, and infrastructure. Here, most of the centers participating in the trials have a financial interest, as the payment made for the conduction of these studies is very high by standard. So payment for performance strategy give rise to conflict of interest. The importance of participation in research planning and protocol writing is not understood by all the participating investigators, and most of the institutions find it an easy way out when a ready-made protocol is handed over to them. So it becomes easy for them. So in spite of so many limitations discussed, there is a silver lining. In future, majority of the trials are expected to be outsourced from the US. And in that scenario, India and China have been projected as a favorite destination for these clinical trials due to the following reasons. There are many hospitals in the country with the state-of-art facilities. These hospitals have well-trained physicians with a huge patient load. India also has a large population of treatment-naive patients. Also, India does not lag behind in good communication and informative technology capabilities, which are of great use in these studies. So data analysis, data entry, management, and finally report writing are now easy to carry out. To a larger extent, the negative perception of trials in the minds of the subject is fast disappearing due to the well-informed subjects. All this helps in building a strong patient base. Completion of research has no meaning unless it is published in the peer-reviewed journals. One talk is there covering this aspect. Dhaliwal et al. Have reported that out of 200 free papers presented in AIOC 2000, only 33 papers were published in the subsequent 7 years in the index journals. Such a low percentage of publication from the completed work shows apathy towards publication by researchers. The other possible cause could be a lack of quality research work presented in AIOC. Kumaragurupari published a study in IJO. Their conclusion shows a heartening trend to nearly doubling of the publications from 284 in 2001 to 460 in 2006 by Indian researchers. However, 50% of the publications came from only 9 major eye hospitals in India. A PubMed search of publications by Indian authors and institutions in 2008 showed about 16,000 results as against about 11,000 in 2005. Hopefully, the 2009 amendment of the regulations of MCI for appointment of teachers will provide enough incentive for researchers to publish their completed research. So in India, the scope for research is tremendously high, simply because India is a vast country with a rapidly growing economy. And there are many organizations such as ICMR, DBT, DST, WHO, and others who are prepared to fund for the appropriate research. ICMR has identified the scope of research in ophthalmology and has appointed coordinators for the various subspecialties like pediatric ophthalmology, diabetic retinopathy, cornea, and etc. To conclude, India is fast becoming a new destination for multicentric trials. It is time to wake up and educate ourselves with nitty-gritty of the research to reap the entire benefit from this favorable trend. We have a huge potential and we must explore it to its full capacity. Thank you for listening me.
Great presentation, sir. And raising all the relevant issues, causing hurdles to become an ophthalmic researcher in India. All the valid issues you have properly narrated. So Dr. Bhalla sir has to go to next session also. So we'll start with his presentation. Dr. Bhalla sir, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, sir. So I'm going to share.
Sir, please.
Yeah, I'm going to share my presentation. Just give me a minute.
So Bhalla sir is the head of the Department of Ophthalmology at DDU Hospital. And he's also member scientific committee AIOS and treasurer at DOS. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Collaboration. My topic is collaboration with pharma and surgical companies for ophthalmic research. Industry funding for medical research is very essential to advance the treatment and prevention of many diseases, and companies can contribute by supporting research that improves eye care. But there are ethical issues involved and this involves practicing ophthalmologists, researchers, and academic faculty. And dangers do exist when researchers collaborate with industry, and these because they are being closely scrutinized by the public and the media. So what are the fields in which we ophthalmologists can do research? And it is really required. India's entry into the one of the important field is stem cell research. And India's entry into stem cell research has progressed from few institutions to currently over 40 institutions and hospitals. And leading ones are in 2008 STEMpeutics, which has started from Manipal University campus, and STEMside, which is a joint venture of Apollo Hospitals and Cadila. And ICMR is drawing up plans for research in field of stem cell in ophthalmology, and LVPI and Narayan Netralaya have already started this. Second thing is in the field of medical devices, because as you see from this slide that the per capita spend on medical devices in India is the lowest, that is about $3 compared to other countries, and particularly in contrast to USA, which is spending $340. So there is a sizable growth opportunity available of research in the field of medical devices, and it is a challenge in India to produce medical devices that are not only cost competitive but also effective. And this can be used in the field of screening of various diseases like intraocular pressure screening devices, and treatment modalities, rehabilitation, and then monitoring like with portable perimeters. Another field is of biosimilars, and India has been on the forefront of biosimilar developments, and notable among this is ranibizumab generic, which has been produced in India, and latanoprost room temperature, which is another product which has come out of India. Gene therapy is another field, and the first FDA approval of gene therapy for a genetic disease, Vority gene Neparvovac. This was for ocular indication, inherited retinal disease. So development will help of gene therapy in managing not only glaucoma, inherited retinal diseases, geographical atrophy, uveitis, and many corneal dystrophies. So let us talk of an ideal situation of collaboration of ophthalmologists with these companies. A prominent ophthalmic specialist consultant for many companies in his fields, he receives handsome compensation for continuing education courses at his institution, for personal research, and he also believes that his involvement does not affect his opinions, his patient care, and he's not hesitant to also contradict the various things of the sponsor's products. But there is less than ideal situation which is more prevalent. A prominent ophthalmologist gave a presentation at a conference using slides provided by the drug company with its logo on every slide. In fact, he was not a key figure in the study presented. His was of one of the many centers in the study. Neither he have access to the study database, and he is forced to present a favorable interpretation of the data. And in some circumstances, the distinction between ethical and non-ethical becomes unclear. So this interaction of physician with industry can be addressed at 5 levels. It can be with practitioner, researcher, teacher, or with professional organizations like various ophthalmic societies. So let us go of the history of collaboration. Before 1980, medical research was performed primarily in academic medical centers. But then in 1980, there was an amendment and a law introduced in USA, which is called Bayh-Dole Act, which permitted universities to commercialize their invention without losing their funding. So 1984, there was $26 million of funding. By 2000, it became $2.3 billion. And of the $6 billion funds generated, about more than 50% goes to investigators in the US alone. In early 1980s, academic institutions partnered with pharma companies to develop research centers in which faculty members carried out industry research. Academic medical centers provided the patents and design for the trials, and companies enjoyed the prestige of working with reputed researchers. And they also reaped benefit from the academic publication that helped them to market their products. And institutions could patent these products and share royalties. Academic medical institutions suddenly enjoyed a tremendous influx of research dollars. But the pharma companies were not happy because they became frustrated by the red tapeism with institutional review boards, and the clinical trials progressed slowly because the physicians were involved also in teaching research and patient care. So pharma companies started losing time and money in the competitive global race for new drugs. So what came in to fill in this vacuum was CRO, that is Contract Research Organization and Site Management Organization. They filled in the vacuum because of the red tapeism and lethargy of academic institution researchers. So in 1991, 80% of the industry money went to academic institution. By 1998, it had dropped to 40%. So now there were 4 layers of involvement: pharma companies, CRO, SMO, academic medical centers, and independent non-academic side. And there was obviously intense competition for drug trial money. And the companies started designing studies favoring their products while not sponsoring studies which were needed by the academic investigators. So although drug trials conducted through academic medical centers have the potential to obtain balance between commercial interests of industry and scientific goals of investigators, but the trials conducted with CROs were prone to be biased, favoring industry. So most academic physicians practice in institutions that have rules governing ethical research, but practitioners unfortunately have no such binding. And so the personal vigilance may be required based on set of ethical principles. Then there was problems with authorship. Pharma companies are primarily interested in new drug applications, and publication in prestigious journal was not their main aim, whereas the researchers' main aim was publication and the development of new drug was secondary. So what happened was that the drug companies started getting the reports prepared by non-writing authors and non-author writers. Obviously, there were editors' concerns at increasing commercial involvement in journal submissions, lack of sufficient significant endpoints in the protocols, lack of correlation with the original hypothesis, and no access was available to the doctors regarding the drug data. And interference in investigators' right to publish trial results also resulted, because company used to hold pre-publication review to find out whether the drug trials is favorable or not. That's how they decided whether it should be published or not. And they had contract that the researchers could not publish the results for 3 years. So the results that were published in such a way to show advantages over the competing drugs. So drug studies sponsored by industry, what happened was that the common practice was shortcut for phase 3 studies, and they started taking clearance from the private institutional review boards and not from the academic institutional review boards. Phase 4 switch studies resulted in patients' medication being switched to companies' medication, and these data unfortunately controlled by the company and not by the ophthalmologist, who unfortunately has little say in the analysis and later publication. So the result was, instead of publishing and doing research in riskier proposition, they started coming out with me too drugs like beta blockers, prostaglandin analogs, and they did not try to put money in riskier breakthrough products. So when there is diversion of research personnel in academic institution from other research to these kind of research, there was problem that the academic institution have started acting as agents of industry and not agents of society. And on top of that, we also have to remember that all researches which are carried out in vitro may not work in vivo. So what is the professional behavior? Ophthalmologists have a duty to do what is in the best interest of the patient and society, whereas business have fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit for their shareholders. They don't have any this duty towards patients to that extent. But we doctors are privileged because we are entrusted with patient care, and patients are considered vulnerable population, and we are expected to live up to a professional promise and behave in an ethical manner. So American Academy has come out with code of ethics for ophthalmic researchers, and they say that where conflict of interest exists between professional judgment concerning the well-being of a patient, then failure to abide by these rules can result in consequences varying from censure to suspension of membership. But what is the ideal situation? Not too rigid, not too lax. Flexibility is needed. Changes must be made in ophthalmic industry relationships. We do not live in an idealist vacuum. There are clear advantages of maintaining communication and collaboration with industry that result in improved patient care, but we must modify our dealings to enable ophthalmologists to regain and retain the public interest. These are the various guidelines which have come. So
Sir, please conclude.
Yeah, this is last slide. So clinical research may lead to improved treatment of diseases. Industry-sponsored research over the years has greatly benefited patients. Discovery and development of important drugs such as statins, RT, latanoprost is the example. And these are the various Indian innovators who have come out with products like pupil expanders, cares, and smartphone products and pre-choppers. So if given a chance, ophthalmologists in India have the potential to really come out with path-breaking products. Thank you everyone for your kind and patient hearing.
That was an excellent presentation, sir. Over to you, Dr. Sahil. We will take questions later on. At the end. We are running short of time.
Okay, sir. I'll just share my screen.
Yeah.
Just hold on, sir. My presentation visible, sir?
Yeah, it's visible. Make it full screen if you can.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you, AOS, and thank you, Dr. Arvind, sir, for giving me this opportunity to be here on this podium. Now, my topic mainly is related to the plan of research, like planning it. It is not in something kind of a very detailed thing. It is the main motto of this particular talk is to give an audience and give all the upcoming researchers an idea that how do you plan it, because until unless you don't plan something in a detailed manner before starting the research, at the end you may not end up in a meaningful research, or you may not end up in a meaningful result, or you may not end up in a meaningful publication. So the main important thing always from your research is to get a positive or a negative, anything, a positive or negative outcome, anything can be there, but the meaningfulness should be there in that outcome, and obviously that thing should add a kind of small new message into the already existing literature. So we should always plan research first and then go ahead with the detailed thing, as has been mentioned in multiple other talks. So I'll go ahead with these 6 wonderful questions like why, what, who, where, when, and how. So starting with the why. So whenever you see any clinical case, or you see a surgery, you see some modification, and you think that, okay, I should do some research. So first thing, that why should I do research on this particular thing, this particular topic, this particular subject, this particular case, anything it may be. Is it a common presentation which is reported very less? It is an uncommon presentation, or it's a unique case, or it's multiple cases, or a different presentation, or a rare presentation, or something of a new investigative modality or a new treatment modality, something of that sort. If it is a surgical part, is a modification or a different outcome. So think first that why should I take up this particular case or this particular topic or this particular subject for a research? Once you get an answer that this is the reason, then you need to think that what shall I do in this particular topic? What shall I do about this particular case? So that will form your research hypothesis. Research hypothesis is very, 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 very important, because you need to think about it first, see into the textbook, read about it, discuss about it, clinical observation, everything will help you in understanding your research hypothesis. Then you do an averagely strong literature search. Obviously, everybody has time limitations, so you cannot do a very detailed literature search from point to point, but do an averagely strong literature search, because that will help you in searching for the lacunae. And then finally you form a good research caution out of which the hypothesis arises. Then it comes the who, because you have planned that, okay, why I want to take up this particular thing, why I want to take, you answered that question, you have formed an hypothesis. Then obviously you need to understand that who are you going to do research on, because if you don't have a good patient base and you think, okay, I should do this some XYZ topic, but you don't see much cases over there in your institution or in your practice, then obviously that is not going to help you in doing a good research. So you need to think about that practical difficulty. Not every thought can be converted into a research. So do look into the practical difficulties, that can you follow up the patient? Do you have a good patient base or not? Then obviously, where are you going to conduct that research? You are in an academic institution, in your medical college, government hospital, you are in some kind of semi-private hospital, in a charitable organization, in a single specialty private, or you have an independent clinic. Because you need a good technological backup, you need a sound theoretical backup, you also need a sound patient base. So these all things are required. They all things get modified with the location where you are working. So think about it. Obviously, when should you start the research? In your career, the best thing is as early as possible, like during your post-graduation. And then as the graph of your career goes up, the chances of your research goes down on a detailed research, because you will have some or the other limitation with the upcoming or your changes in your career. So you try to start your publication, your research in the earlier days. Finally, when I put up all these topics and I form a flow chart, I would like to give you a small flow outline, that how finally are you going to start this research. So you form a research team first, like your junior colleagues, your senior, your mentors. Form a team, because you cannot alone win the battle with the research. So you need to form a team, do a good literature search, divide the responsibilities among yourselves, among the team, catch the lacunae, and then form a research hypothesis, following which you need to look into the practical feasibility. Because till this point, that forming a research question, if you don't if you have some limitation, if you think that, okay, this thesis or this topic may not be feasible, then you have to leave that thing. You don't have to invest your time into this thing, you need to jump into the other topic. So look into the practical feasibility, plan a detailed methodology first on paper, and then take the help of a statistician, form a good Excel sheet. Then finally you go and decide upon the flow of your study in a very detailed manner. So try to plan your research before starting it, before enrolling the first patient. Plan for your research properly. Prime importance, as Dr. Maurya sir has already discussed, that it is the ethics. You need to keep your integrity on, you need to keep your ethics on, because NEJM or Lancet, what they have retracted is just the tip of the iceberg. We all know and we all practically see that there are ample number of researches, publication which are of no values, not done properly, does not add any meaningful outcome. So it is on you who are going to do the research, that you maintain ethical integrity, then only you will have a good research outcome. So give time to your planning, and always remember this final equation: a well-planned research and a good ethical consideration will going to add into a meaningful publication. So our aim should be a meaningful publication with a good message, which you add into literature, which you will remember for the history. Thank you very much.
Any short comments, sir? Dr. Bairwa, sir? Excellent presentation, Dr. Sahil. Thank you so very much. Dr. Bairwa, sir, any short comment? Dr. Rajendra, sir, you would like to add something? Dr. Prasad, sir, unmute yourself.
It was a wonderful presentation from Sahil, and Sahil, I've seen him speaking earlier also. He actually puts in the very positive points into the presentation, and that is what he has done here in this presentation also. Very important, because your research should be meaningful, and it should help the life of the population at a greater level. So it should not restrict to a particular patient, as I said in the beginning, because your research should improve the life of the patients, those who are diseased and those who are about to be diseased. And so it should improve the life of the people at the global level, and it should be meaningful, and it should be published. So that is the most important thing, and it should be published with the meaningful message. Great, Sahil.
Very well said, sir. Any comments, sir? Barwa, sir?
Yeah, it is very important to start research from the early in the career, and
Yeah, to
one
have
should
that
follow.
habit.
Yes, and one should always follow the medical ethics to carry out a meaningful work.
Okay, sir. So we will move to our next speaker, none other than Professor and Dr. Bhavna Sharma. She is a professor and head in the Department of Ophthalmology, AIIMS Bhopal. And she will be speaking on research is not enough, publication is a must. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Arvind. Is the screen visible?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Sharing our screen.
You have to share the screen.
is the screen visible?
No, not yet. Yes, now it's fine.
So my work has been made quite easy by the earlier speakers, and I think they have nicely covered all the topics. So this may not be a very pleasant start to this wonderful session, but then we almost all of us have undergone this kind of statement in our email boxes, and we are sorry to inform you, indicating a rejection in your publication process. So that doesn't deter you from publishing. Once you have done the research, it is the final outcome should be the publication. And we have always seen that there are stories of triumph over rejections. And one of the important story which have been not very which we have all witnessed it recently was this rejection, which was almost about 18 times this lady got rejected, and after that she got published, and what a success it was. So don't get disheartened if you get rejected for your first submission, because you have already done a research which itself was a challenging task. And now publication is important. It is a daunting task, because there may be a rejection which would be a high rate of rejection in good journals, about 90%. The publication cost is whooping, $200 US dollars, and even some journals charge publication cost per page, and there's intense peer review system. There is a long wait. So this daunting task may be ahead of you, but then you must always endeavor, because then ultimately you have to publish your work and get the name which you are actually fit for. And why people may ask you that, why do you want to publish? We are well settled in our practice, and we are doing a good job, and we are having a good doing a good residency, or after that residency we may get good jobs. But then you must always endeavor for publication, because it is important for your promotions, for funding, acquisition of grants from good agencies. You want to share your knowledge, you want to share your research, and also establish your institute as an academic institute. You also want a peer recognition, and also you want to be an inspiration to your peers. So I think these are the values which are worth putting up effort and putting up your hard work. So the process, as I told you, is a daunting process, from initiating the research to the final publication. And during this process, it may take some time. That means from initiation of the research to preparation of manuscript submissions, the decision, then revisions and re-revisions, to sometimes to rejection also. But during this process, you have to have a patience, and what not to do is equally important here. That means you must refrain from falsification of data, from plagiarism. There must not be any conflict of interest. If it is there, you must clearly acknowledge it. The authorship conflict should be clearly mentioned before the publication, before you go ahead for the publication. Duplicate submission, the specific no for any publication ethics. And these are few things to remember once you initiate a publication process. That is you can go back and read this later on. I have got the shortage of time, and I would just take it very briefly here, that it is the International Council for Journal Medical Editors which gives the guidelines, or which gives you the guidelines for publication ethics, and the consort guidelines which specifically mentions the reporting of trials, that is the trial design, their conduct, analysis, and interpretation. All these are important. The Vancouver Protocol that decides the authorship credit, the Helsinki Charter, which has already been covered earlier by one of the speakers, and approvals, that is institutional approvals, are important. So the Vancouver Protocol covers the authorship credit, and the first author, who should be the first author, this should be decided before submission of the manuscript, and somebody who has done the most work should be made the first author. And of course we give chance for the juniors to be the first author. The mentor is always at the last. Going to a good journal. So the good journal, the standard is fixed, that is it should have a good impact factor, the immediacy index. The lead time or the incubation time is important, of course the ISSN number. So these are the important considerations while you want your work to be published. And these are the top ophthalmology journals with good impact factors. All of us dream to get our work published here. And some of the impact factors in these journals are a whooping around 9.4 in Progressive Retinal Eye Research to Ophthalmology and American Journal of Ophthalmology, and our Indian Journal of Ophthalmology is also a very important good impact factor. While, as I talked about, that you face hurdles during submission and acceptance, the hurdles of peer review, the revisions and rejection, there are other side of the story where you get a red carpet welcome for publication. That means journals, they lure you for publication, that come and submit your manuscript in our journal. So beware of these journals. They are the predatory journals, and they would bring down your reputation of in the scientific committee. So in the scientific world. So refrain from publishing in these journals. That is, they only want your money to be invested in these journals. And these are the examples of the emails which we very frequently get are in mailboxes. So we must not be lured by these tactics. And these predatory journal was the name was quoted by the Jeffrey Well. I would not go into the details, but yes. And while publication, the three most important thing is read and just read the information which you want to acquire, the information which you want to publish. You would get it proficient only while reading. So to develop a good writing skill, to get a good written articles, and also to good authors to review your article once you have written it, everything that depends on your reading the data. And before embarking on what journal to choose for it, as I've already told you, it depends on the impact factor and the immediacy index and other standards. You must know the journal, its editors, the scope of the journal. Like you want to publish a cornea work, you preferably want to get it submitted in a cornea article, in a cornea journal. Otherwise, if there is all the more chances of getting the work rejected in the first go. So also you must pay good attention to your grammar and language, because that is what the editor would look for. And before assigning it to the reviewers, he would look for the language which you are submitting it. And always read the instructions for author carefully, which is given, which is specific for all journals, and that would help you in structuring your manuscript. Also, it is important that you must be knowing what is being published. What is the current scenario of your field, or what is the current advancement in a particular field. For that, you must keep on reading journals, the literatures available, and also attend conferences. You meet with your peers and the faculties who are there, who are working on that already. And also from the very beginning, you must get into the habit of maintaining your records and clinical images. That would help you once you know that on what subject we want to write, and should you have the data beforehand, it would be much easy for you. And develop a research plan is very important, as Sahil has already covered. The choice can be anything from the research articles. You can write good review articles in good journals, case reports, case series, letters to editors, all would establish you in the scientific world. And once you are knowing about these intricacies of publication, you are almost done. You are almost, the half of your work is done. You have got the motivation to work for a cause. You know what is the problem, you know what is the solution to the problem, and also you know what would you be adding through your literature, that what would be the result of your study, the potential result of your study. So
ma'am, please conclude.
okay. So just a brief overview of the structure of a paper.
Sure, ma'am. Please.
Yeah, and all the manuscripts should preferably be written in this King's model of this is a logical representation of your data, and the title and abstract being most important thing, followed by introduction. The method should be clearly stated. These are the biomedical softwares which you must read, or which you must take help of while doing a statistical analysis and representation of that. The ethical clearance and everything has been already covered. The study period, location, and type should preferably be given in methodology. The inclusion criteria should be crisply defined. Data collection interventions and tests should be defined preferably in a workflow or a plan, that is a consort flow diagram should be given. The outcome measures, again, the primary and secondary outcome measures could be clearly defined. Following into the discussion, that means what was the finding of your study and how does it vary from all previously known studies, and is it in confirmation to the previously known studies, or what is the difference from those studies? So you must be able to give reasons to your confirmation as well, to why there's a difference in these already known results. So and to conclusion should summarize your current data as well as your outcomes in a statistically significant manner. Okay, so go ahead and publish your work. Let the world know you as an innovator and a writer. So thank you very much for patient hearing. Keep writing and keep publishing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for such a great presentation. Over to Dr. Vaishali. We are running short of time.
Yes, sir.
Please start sharing your screen. She will be speaking on how to manage sources of funding.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. Wonderful lectures by all. At the outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Arvind Maurya, sir, for giving me this opportunity and increasing my knowledge also about this topic. So medical researchers are scientists who seek to understand human diseases and develop better ways of preventing and treating the ill health. As a medical researcher, it is our utmost responsibility to conduct research to improve the health status and longevity of the population. So we need to have effective communication, thinking, decision making, data collection, data analysis, and be observant skills, like already told about by the previous speakers. So what we had an elaborately told about sir had told earlier about the clinical trials. So where does the funding come? So we have the trial planning, trial design, sponsorship, funding. Yes, so and then there are various other funding options. So here, if it is secured, then the trial setup is there, and then there comes the approvals and registrations. Then there's the final protocol, then management oversight, then trial conducts and trial closeouts, communication, and finally the archiving. So funding in clinical research, the costs involved in planning and conducting clinical research are quite significant and require adequate allocation of funds and resources. Therefore, it is recommended that researchers carefully plan and budget out the trial costs in order to secure adequate funding. So what are the reasons why we need funding in clinical researches? So first is the manpower. Most of the times, if you have a project which requires multiple tasks, so we need adequate manpower. The instrumentation, the investigations, the compensations might be needed if at all, and transportation, data processing, ethical committee fees, and the other miscellaneous consumables. So what are the types of funding? These can be the research funding, research training and career development funding, and rest, conference funding, administratives, and so on and so forth. So what are the agencies that fund the clinical trials? We have the domestic as well as the international researchers should pay special attention to the eligibility criteria for funding agency. They should pay attention to the format for submission of the documents, which are very important. And there is a definite timeline for submission. So we'll elaborate on each slide now. What are the eligibility criteria? Each funding agencies have different various criteria, but usually they funds are allocated to people. We are lucky that we are in developing country, and we those who wish to do research for the benefit of our own countrymen and come back, or if it is in our own country, or if we do outside in the foreign countries. But if we plan to come back, then of course the funds are very important, and they prefer those who want to come back, and if the research is for the benefit of the countrymen. Then the validity of the proposal, which Dr. Sahil had said, and the novelty of the research work and its usefulness. So what about the format for submission? So this, again, I would like to tell the young researchers that this is very important. The paperwork, the documentation is of utmost importance before you submit to any agencies. So what registration details are to be done in detail, you have to be very meticulous about it. The proposal summary, what you intend to do, like ma'am had said that what is the research about, what do you want to plan to do, how have you planned your research, the core proposal, the budget, the detailed biodata of principal investigator and the co-investigator. I think this is also an important issue, because if your biodata or your CV is strong enough, then it does make a difference and impression on the agencies which are funding your research work. Endorsement letter from the head of the institute is mandatory, and Arvind sir has already elaborated on the topic of conflict of interest. So I will not highlight it more. He has already in his first lecture given an insight about that topic. The timeline for submission. So there are, accordingly to the academic sessions, in foreign universities, usually it is September and January, according to their two sessions. For us, our academic sessions are from June. So for that time, most of the timeline is, say, 31st June, by the end of or before the starting of the new season academic sessions. So your researchers, I would like to make them aware that you should be aware of the dates, because it's no point that, okay, you have done all the work, your documentation is everything, and alas, you come to know that the timeline has gone. So that is very important. You be abreast with the situation, that by what deadline you have to submit the proposals. Few Indian funding bodies already elaborated earlier by the earlier speakers. One is the Department of Biotechnology from Ministry of Science and Technology, which funds clinical trials related to infectious disease, vaccines, and diagnostics. We all know that we have faced this last 1.5 years of pandemic, and how important was that we were all looking forward for the vaccinations, and so much research was done, and it was funded by these ministries. And so here we have that we have now a vaccine to the dreaded disease. Then there is Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council, which funds for academic research. We are all as medicos, very familiar with Indian Council of Medical Research, where its mandate is to formulate, coordinate, and promote the biotechnology research in India, whereas right from the undergraduate levels also, Indian Council of Medical Research helps in funding the undergraduate, postgraduates, and the fellows according to their researches. Then there's Department of Science and Technology, then Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. Also, we are quite aware as medicos that this also helps, and it is a very important funding body. Then there's Department of Health Research and DRDO. A little short word about the international funding agencies. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, then National Institutes of Health, US Department, World Bank, the Wellcome Trust, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, European Union, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundations. Now coming to our ophthalmology part. So what are the different funding things in ophthalmology are subject related? Ma'am has already said that different specialties are also getting funds, or subspecialties. So broadly, I would like to tell that there is an Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology. which gives funds for your research in that particular topics. There's David Epstein Award for glaucoma, Bert Glaser Award for retina, Krissig Award for retinal surgeries, Mallinckrodt Uveitis Research Scholarship, Pfizer Ophthalmic Research Fellowship. For Indian, if we want it, then again, the Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology collaborates with Team India, and there is a funding agency by ARVO and India. Then there is India-US collaborative research funds also. And then everybody, most of our PGs and the teaching faculties know about the ICO Research Committee. So that they are also play a major part in funding our ophthalmological researches. This is a reference article for those who are interested. It is vision-related research priorities from IGO, September and October 2012. I would like to say at this point that the young researchers are very lucky and at great advantage that they have everything at the tip of their fingertips, because everything is available on Google. I really salute to the senior researchers and our senior faculty members who had to do everything on their own, go to the library, look at all those books, chapters, and then do the communication long by post and all that. And then it used to take months together. But fortunately, we are all in this. Finished, sir. So okay. Thank you for giving.
That's really great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for patient listening.
Dr. Bhalla sir, you would like to add something? Dr. Bhalla sir. So I would like to thank every one of you for sparing your valuable time and making this instruction course a successful one. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you to the chairperson. Thank you all speakers. It was quite a valuable session. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you.
Isha, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Next session.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all co-faculties.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you.
Thank you all.
See you. And what a performance by you at the cultural program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hope this performance was better than my dance performance.
Yeah, it will always be.
Yeah, academics is forever more important.
You are first a scientist than anything else.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Passion keeps on continuing.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.